The Big Ten schedule is one that did some folks a favor and did others not so much many favors. I think it's kind of an eye of the beholder situation.
Mm-hmm.
But CBS's Tom Fornelli, he put his Big Ten strength of schedule rankings up for all of the Big Ten. Basically, who has the hardest and least difficult paths to success in the Big Ten? Number one, I think it's pretty easy to say that UCLA's schedule is an absolute S show on every single level. They have road trips to both Hawaii and LSU. I don't think you will find a team that travels to two further destinations.
Yeah.
Like that's a 5-hour flight to the west and a 3.5, 4-hour flight to the east.
Mm-hmm. Something like that.
You've got essentially.
Well, then what happens? And then once they get into the Big Ten part of the schedule.
But I mean, just like you have a 9-hour difference between how far you go between just those two non-conference games. Like that's
a big.
Yuck.
Yeah.
They've also got a game against Fresno State, which is probably going to be
100 degrees.
Well, not just that, it's probably the best team in the Mountain West. Like Fresno State's always feisty.
Like that. I guess. Well, no. What are they at Fresno, or is it probably at?
No, that's at home. That one's at home. So
there
Fresno's at home.
So you don't have to worry about getting pelted with batteries.
No, exactly. Yeah. Well, I mean, they could travel.
Yeah.
And then in their league play games, this is their road slate: Penn State, Nebraska, and Washington. So if you go Penn State to Hawaii, there is no other team that is coming close to that kind of travel. I mean, you could say that who's playing in Ireland this year? It's two teams that have nothing to do with Ireland. I
forget. I
remember thinking I think we said like Iowa State.
Let's see here. Pay new
that's
to a stalling for time.
That's that one international game that you're like
Dublin, Florida State and Georgia Tech.
Florida State, that's who it was. And Georgia Tech. Ah, yes, the strong Irish roots of Florida and Georgia.
Yeah.
But even then, like that's not nearly as far as going from, the West Coast to Ireland, which heaven forbid a team ever does that.
Right.
But you've got this UCLA schedule with, number one, they are in shambles. Their organization right now is just poor Deshaun Foster. I can't say I'm rooting for him because it's UCLA. Let's be honest here. I'm not going to do that. But like, it's kind of like your adopted kid brother, where you're just kind of like, come on, like, get your S together, dude.
Right.
Like that's where I'm at with this. And like Deshaun Foster, I liked watching him in college. Ton of fun to watch in college. So I kind of want him to be successful, not too successful, just. Mildly successful.
Yeah.
But obviously he had
diet successful.
Yes, exactly. he had that interview that was a dumpster fire. They're not doing great on the recruiting trail. Dante Moore obviously leaves and goes to Oregon. They have the calimony, the money that they're giving up in state to figure that whole thing out.
Yeah.
And then you look at this schedule, and they are just gonna get their teeth kicked in. And you're just sitting there going, that's tough. Number 2 on the list is Purdue. Anybody really cares because it's Purdue. Number 3, and this one hurts me. It's USC because they do. It's a slightly less holy crap schedule than UCLA, but you've got 2 non-conference games against LSU and Notre Dame. I don't think there's anybody in the country that has 2 more difficult non-conference games than LSU and Notre Dame.
Now the LSU one, is that a neutral site?
Neutral in LA or in Las Vegas.
Gotcha.
So LSU travels pretty hard.
Yeah.
I hope my guys travel well.
Well, come on.
Look,
LA to Vegas, come on.
Look, we typically, despite our pretentious roots, we do usually travel well. I don't know how well we'll travel there compared to LSU because boy, do they travel. But that's gonna be tough. They also play Michigan and Penn State. That is brutal.
Yes.
Absolutely brutal. Michigan finishes number 5 on here. They have the early season game with Texas and Michigan, which is going to be electric. That's probably going to be one of the best matchups of the season early on for sure. They travel to Washington, which, while a rematch of the national title from 6 months ago, I think it'll be a little bit different considering there's about 30 players that are no longer on both teams combined.
Yeah, no kidding, huh?
Michigan put in 18. Washington lost their entire offense.
Yeah, you're basically looking at two new teams.
Think about that. 31 players are gone
Yeah.
from those two teams.
Mm-hmm.
At least. Because
And both head coaches.
holy crap. Have we ever seen a rematch with more turnover than that?
I'm not sure. I mean, nothing jumps to mind.
Good Lord. I mean, I know that Georgia team lost a crap ton, but good God, man. That's nuts. I'm trying to rack my brain off the top of my head of like a title rematch or a big-time bowl rematch that happened the next year. I can't think of a game that was... Oof.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. But that's, I mean, the Michigan schedule is kind of Washington's kind of middle of the pack. They do have USC at home in Washington, which again is why USC schedule is tough, is more travel. I wonder if they'll get out there with the sprinklers and get ready to test through the wet weather again. God, that was so embarrassing. And they do have road games at Oregon and at Penn State. You know, obviously two of the toughest places in the country to play.
Mm-hmm.
Scrolling down through, Ohio State comes in at number 11. Number 11 in the Big Ten. Okay. Akron, Western Michigan, and Marshall are their non-conference games. That's like a basketball non-con.
Yeah, right.
Like, let's tune up for the season.
Yeah.
That's some very much Nick Saban, Alabama scheduling.
I didn't know the Zips had a football team.
Right? Great uniform design, though.
Yeah.
Zips, we need more like unique names.
Mm-hmm.
I like those. And Marshall, still around. They do a Big Ten trip to Michigan State, and then they get Iowa at home. They go, obviously their difficult road game at Oregon. If Ohio State wins that game, gonna be tough sledding for them to find a loss outside of Michigan.
Yeah.
They do have Nebraska at home, and they travel to Penn State. But that in between that, they have Purdue, Northwestern, Indiana, which if they stumble there, that's their own fault. If you're wondering, if I'm down at 11, where the hell does Oregon fit in there? It's not 12, it's not 13, it's not 14, but 15th. 15th out of 18 teams, the Oregon Ducks schedule. And you're like, how can that be? They play Ohio State and Michigan because they play no one else. That's why. And it's like, well, they play Boise State. It's a tough non-con. You're right. It's a tough non-con.
It's not the same.
It's not.
As it used to be.
It's not Chris Peterson's Boise State. You better hope not, because Chris Peterson's Boise State came into Oregon and at Boise State and kicked your teeth in. So pray that that's not the case. And I don't think that's the case. But you've got Michigan State, Illinois, Maryland, and Washington, which Washington, while a rival, and then you're going to have those rivalry games. They are not the same deal. Right. And Oregon State is clearly not the same, even though that game's still happening in the early part of the season, which is
it just feels weird.
And yes, it's a road game, but it's a 25-minute bus ride. Let's be honest here, it's nothing serious in that regard. So, it's going to be very, very, very interesting to see how this shakes out, but Oregon got a very favorable schedule outside of those two massive games. And if Oregon takes care of business, the road sets up for them incredibly well to not only make the college football playoff, but get a bye. At absolute worst, they should be a home seed in the college football playoff. Barring, knocking on all the wood, barring any injuries, that should be the floor for them. Is hosting a home playoff.
Well, and the hard part with Oregon, those two, is every year there's that one trip-up game.
That one, and you've got
that you don't see coming.
You've got Ohio State and Michigan. Those are the ones that you cannot falter anywhere else.
Right.
And you have no excuse to.
Yeah.
Look, everybody's like, does Dan Lanning have to overcome that hump of beating that team? Yes, and then they're going to beat Washington this year.
Well, and when it happened, or not when. if it happens, if they go out and beat Washington this year, then you're going to have all the Husky fans and all the Oregon haters saying, well, but you didn't do it when it counted. You didn't do it when it mattered.
Yeah. But it will matter this year because if they trip you up this year, they're not going to let you live it down.
Yeah.
Remember, Jed Fish his opening remarks at Big Ten Media Day was just a reminder, we've beat Oregon 3 times last year.
Yeah.
Or last 3 times, excuse me.
Yeah.
Twice last year. Just want to remind, hey, we're new to the conference. Those other guys over there, we beat them. Just a reminder. You can't let that be the game that trips you up. I mean, none of these games can trip you up.